Very fine display, Mr. Mason. You're hoping to carry off the anti-rhinum shield again this year?
Well, as president of the it's hardly really for me to say, but I must say I can't see any better than mine.
You know, they looked a little off colour, I thought, a few weeks ago. They'd gone a bit at the leaves.
Yes, well, when the leaves begin to curl at the edges, you can be quite sure that your anti-rhinos want something.
Ah, yes, a female of the species.
No, soot. That's what they want. Soot.
It's very difficult to get with all these smokeless zones.
Well, it's the same with manure, isn't it?
Albert.
Well, I mean, never mind where have all the flowers gone, where have all the horses gone. You know, when I was a small boy, every Saturday afternoon my father would give me a bucket and a shovel.
Albert, I don't think it's quite the place, dear.
Why not? It's a flower show, isn't it? What better place to talk about
Albert,
horses?
we've only just had tea.
Mr. Green, tell me, how are your tomatoes this year?
I have high hopes of them, Mr. Haddock.
Your hollyhocks are a joy to behold this year, Mr. Haddock.
That's very kind of you.
Wouldn't surprise me if you won the Hollyhock Cup this year, Mr. Haddock.
Really? Do you think so?
Oh, that would be lovely, Albert. You've worked so hard.
Well, so have you, Florence. You gave those snails a hell of a time.
I'll give you snails.
Don't demean yourself, Horace. I've seen her.
Good afternoon.
Come along, Horace. Let us move to where the flowers don't smell nasty.
Green, I want to work with you. Here.
Certainly, Mr. Powell.
What on earth has got into the flowers?
Well, it's what's got into their hollyhocks that's upsetting them. I mean, just look at those leaves.
Goodness gracious. Is this their prize exhibit?
It's like a Gruyere cheese to me. More holes than the calendar.
No wonder they're upset. You see, Mr. Fowler's won the cup for the last 14 years. It's some sort of disease.
No, dear, no, that's snails. You see, now you can see why I was so anxious to get rid of them from our garden.
They really are the most awful pest. You see, one has to get up at the crack of dawn in order to dispose of them.
Yes, I've seen you disposing of them.
Ladies and gentlemen, pray silence for the President of the Riverside Horticultural Association, Mr. Maurice Mason.
All right, come in. Very much indeed. Well, now, ladies and gentlemen, we've come to the most exciting part of the afternoon's festivities, the awards of the various trophies. Now, we're very fortunate this afternoon in having with us Councillor Mrs. Worthington. Come along. Mrs. Worthington, come along. It's your turn now, dear. Come along. Come along, Mrs. Worthington. Now, there. Up there, if you can manage the step. Yeah, good. Right. Now, Councillor Mrs. Worthington has very graciously consented to present these prizes at this, our 26th anniversary of our show. Now, I'm going to ask our Honourable Secretary, Mr. Green, to read out the list of the prize winners.
The Lady Mayoress Cup for Hollyhocks.
Unfortunately, the Lady Mayoress is quite incapable of being with us this afternoon.
Been at the gin again.
But as I said earlier, we're very fortunate in having Councillor Mrs. Worthington
Looks as though she's had a few herself.
Yeah.
to present this magnificent cup. Thank you, Mr. Green.
Ladies and gentlemen, the prize for the best show of Hollyhocks this year goes to Mr. Albert Haddock.
Come along, Mr. Haddock. Come along. You step up here. Come along.
He's a menace to society.
He ought to be trodden on like his snails.
I shall now ask Councillor Mrs. Worthington to present this cup. Now then, Mr. Haddock. Just all right. Just put squeeze. Never mind. That's it.
It gives me great pleasure to award this magnificent grower to the trophy to the crop of the best
Hollyhocks.
hollyhocks. Well done. May you win again next year.
You shouldn't have bloody well won this year.
Just control your language, Mr.
I can
Fowler.
understand how he feels, having won it for so many years.
He'd have won it outright this year.
Yes, so I believe. Still, it would be dishonest of me if I were to say that I was not overjoyed and extremely proud to have won this magnificent trophy.
Your perishing snails won that trophy for
He
you.
couldn't grow watercress on a wet flannel.
Thank you, dear lady, thank you.
Objection!
Here.
Order, please. The verdict is quite unanimous.
I'm not talking about the verdict. I'm talking about him. He's a cheat,
Now,
he
let
is.
us all try and remain calm.
I'll never be more bloody calm in all my life.
Just get on with the prize giving, Mr. Green.
We come
please.
now to the Arthur Crabtree Shield.
He's not having that cup.
We're raising an objection.
Yes.
Commission up there.
Objection.
I see now. Do it.
Do get on with it, Mr. Green.
The Arthur Crabtree Shield.
I demand to be heard.
I think, Mr.
For
Haddock, it might be better for you to get out.
Yes, look here.
Yes, now.
Well, you with that cup.
No, Mr. Maurice Mason.
my dear, I think that's got the worst of the tomato off now. Oh, dear, whoever's that?
It still feels very sticky.
Well, I know, dear. I'm afraid it'll have to go to the cleaners. It's Mr. Mason and Mr. Green, dear.
Oh, good evening, gentlemen. Is the flower show over?
Well, I'm afraid, Mr. Haddock, we've had a rather unseemly experience.
Nearly had a riot on our hands,
Why?
Mr. Haddock.
What happened?
The Fowlers.
Do you know, I thought they were upset about something, although there was no reason for them to behave like that, surely.
Well, we've just held an extraordinary special committee meeting about it.
In the beer tent.
Oh, really? That sounds portentous. Well, what was the matter?
Well, as a result of objections raised by Mr. and Mrs. Fowler
And heard by us in full committee.
in the beer tent, I'm afraid it's our sad duty to tell you that the award for the Hollyhock Cup this year will have to be held in abeyance.
Until certain matters have been clarified.
Why? What have the Fowlers been saying?
Well, you see, it's very awkward. They have accused you,
In full committee.
refreshments having been taken.
In the beer tent,
Yeah.
yes, I know. But why, well, why do you want to take my cup away?
Well, you see, they claim that your hollyhocks are better than theirs, and they also claim that you filled their garden with snails, and that it was your snails who ate up their prize hollyhocks.
Oh, well, really, that's absurd. Snails eat anything.
Ah, but why did they eat your hollyhocks?
Because we took the trouble to keep the snails away from our hollyhocks. Didn't we, Mr. Mason? Anyway, how do they know that they were our snails in particular?
Well, of course. I mean, nobody owns a snail.
They come from your property.
Well, how do the Fowlers know that? They could very well be your snails.
Well, I don't have snails in my garden.
No, of course not. No. You get up at the crack of dawn, don't you? And you dispose of them by popping them over the garden fence into my garden. I've seen you from my bathroom window.
I must say I'm deeply shocked to hear that, Mr. Mason. Supposing one of the poor things had happened to hit a stone, thus causing it to perish. I would not care to have the blood of a snail on my hands, Mr. Mason, or any other animal come to that.
But nevertheless, Mr. Haddock, it is my painful duty to hold this cup in safekeeping until the committee decide exactly who is to have it.
And when will that be?
When we hear the result of the court case.
What court case?
Mr. Fowler is bringing an action against you for damage and trespass of property.
Oh, he's a bit of an optimist, isn't
And
he?
that is not all. He is furthermore seeking an injunction to have the award of the Hollyhock Cup rendered null and void.
Well, he may seek, but he won't find. And after the way he's behaved, if he knocks at my door, it will not be opened unto him.
My Lord, in this action, Mr. Fowler is suing his neighbour, Mr. Haddock, for alleged trespass.
Haddock? Did you say Mr. Haddock?
Yes, my
Mr.
Lord.
Albert Haddock?
Yes, my Lord.
Really? Oh, where is he? Oh, there you are. What on earth are you doing sitting back there?
Well, with your lordship's permission, I would like to conduct my own defence.
Well, I should hope so. I'd be very disappointed if you didn't, Mr. Haddock. But why aren't you sitting next to Sir Joshua?
Well, I haven't been asked, my lord. You see, it is a matter of courtesy.
Yes, the front bench is traditionally reserved for Queen's Counsel, my Lord.
But I'm sorry, I didn't quite hear that, Sir Joshua. You know, I think I must be getting a little deaf. Anyway, Sir Joshua, in order that I might hear Mr. Haddock's argument very clearly, I'm sure you'll waive formality and let him sit next to you.
Yes, my Lord, with pleasure.
Thank you, Sir Joshua. I knew you would mind. There, all right now, Mr. Haddock?
Much more comfortable, my lord, thank you.
Good. Well, then, go on, will you, Sir Joshua?
My Lord, my client, Mr. Fowler, is suing Mr. Haddock for alleged trespass and damage to property. Plaintiff and defendant live in adjoining houses and are both keen gardeners. Plaintiff alleges that the defendant made a practice of throwing snails over the dividing wall, and this damaging his plants and preventing him from winning outright the Lady Mary's Cup at the Riverside Horticultural Society's annual flower show.
And who did win this cup?
I did, my lord.
What, you won a cup?
Yes, my lord.
Congratulations, Mr. Haddock. What on earth for?
For these, my lord.
Ah, foxgloves.
No, my lord. Hollyhocks.
No, pity. I like foxgloves. Well then, Sir Joshua, shall we go on?
My Lord, as you will see, the winning of this cup is an important part of my case, and I'll not trouble your lordship with a speech,
You're not doing too badly.
since the facts will appear clearly before the evidence you will hear, my Lord.
I too desire to be heard.
Who are you?
My name is Green, my lord, and I'm here in my capacity as president of the NSPAC, The National Society for the Prevention of All Cruelty.
No sign of Mr. Green here. Is it anything to do with you, Sir Joshua?
No, sir, Mr. Green is not a party to these proceedings as far as I'm concerned, my lord.
Mr. Haddock?
Oh, I know Mr. Green very well, my lord. He gets very bothered about whether snails have souls.
Now, they have, Mr. Haddock, and you do well to remember that.
Yes.
Where do snails go, my lord, when they die?
Look, Mr. Green, this is not an ecclesiastical...
And there's the poor thing's spouse, my lord. What happens to her when she's left?
Neither is it a divorce court.
Have you considered their feelings, my lord? Tossed into an alien world, forced to pick up the pieces and start life anew? Poor little things. How would you feel, my lord, if a huge great hand dropped out of the sky and chucked your wife over the garden wall?
Joshua, shall we get on?
Yes, my lord, yes, with pleasure. I'll now call my first witness, the plaintiff, Mr. Horace Fowler. Now, Mr. Fowler, your house is next door to that of the defendant, is it not?
It's next to Haddock's.
Yes, that is what I said.
Worse luck.
I beg your pardon?
I said worse luck.
Yes, I heard you. What do you mean?
Being next to Haddock's.
Oh, and does your garden march with that of Mr. Haddock?
Eh?
Well, I mean, is your garden bounded on the one side by that of Mr. Haddock?
Well, that's what I keep saying, don't I? It's next to it, isn't it?
Yes, he does keep saying that, you know. Can you get on?
Yes, well, Mr. Fowler, you made yourself very clear. Thank you very much. Now, you are a keen gardener?
Well, of course I wouldn't be here if I wasn't, would I?
Yes, and so is Mr. Haddock, is he not?
Well, he does his best.
And I understand there's a considerable competition locally for a trophy known as the Lady Mary's Hollyhock Cup, is that right?
That is right.
Which you won last year?
That's right, and 13 years before that. Nobody can grow hollyhocks like mine.
Yes, and would this cup become yours in perpetuity? Have you won it again this year?
That is right. 15 years running. Nobody ever thought that such a thing could happen. And thanks to him, it didn't.
Well, will you tell his lordship what did happen?
My lord, in my garden, I'd cultivated a giant yellow fig-leafed hollyhock, the like of which the world has never seen. I tended it like a little child, ever since it had first seen the light of day as a tender shoot in mid-April.
Now, Mr. Fowler, I can see that this is very distressing for you.
Fair broke me heart, that's what it did.
Yes, well, when you've composed yourself, I wonder if you could tell his lordship how this tragic loss came about, would you?
Right. My lord, the day before the flower show, I was weeding out the rockery, and my lady wife come to me, and she said, "It's been got at," she said. Got at? I said, "What as?"
And what did your wife reply?
"Your big yellow hollyhock," she said. 2 big holes in one leaf, and 3 in another.
And, what was the cause of the damage?
Well, it wasn't bullet holes, I can tell you that. Oh, no. It was something, a weapon much more subtle than that had been used. Snails, my lord.
Oh, I see. So they've been attacked and eaten by snails.
That is right.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Mr. Fowler, I find myself somewhat at a loss. Now, your great big hollyhock is attacked by snails, and you accuse me of being responsible.
That is right.
Well, how can that be?
They was yours, that's how.
Oh, they were my snails, were they?
That's right.
Yes.
They was. Were.
Yes. Did you see them?
They was having their dinner. Dining in state. They was dining in state on my big yellow hollyhock.
Ah, I see. And you did recognize them as mine, did you? Or perhaps you passed the time of day with them. Did you? You asked them where they lived?
They lived with you.
Oh, they told you that, did they?
Well, of course they didn't. They was too busy eating.
Well, they probably thought it was rude to speak with their mouths full.
Are you getting at me?
No, what I am getting at, Mr. Fowler, is that one snail looks very much like another snail. And there was no reason for you to suppose that those snails on your giant hollyhock had anything to do with me.
They was your snails.
They could just as easily have been yours.
I don't have snails in my garden.
Oh, really? That's a very remarkable garden, isn't it? In its complete freedom from destructive gastropods.
What?
Snails.
Oh.
You say that you're never troubled with them.
Never, never, my lord. You should have seen my garden last year. First prize hollyhocks, naturally. First prize sea kale. First prize lettuce. Not to mention a second for geraniums.
Mr. Fowler, just as a matter of interest, to what do you attribute your immunity from snails?
Vigilance, my lord. Eternal vigilance. That's how we come to know about his snails. My lady wife saw his missus chucking him over the fence.
What your lady wife saw is not evidence, Mr.
What do you mean
Fowler.
it's not evidence? I thought it's supposed to be a court of justice.
Yes, and so it is, Mr. Fowler, but Mr. Haddock is entirely right. Your wife must give her evidence herself.
Now, Mrs. Fowler, would you please tell his lordship what you saw?
Whom did you see?
The woman that lives with him.
Oh, and you know this lady to be Mrs. Florence Haddock?
I don't know her to be anything. I presume her to be who she says she is, but I got no proof.
Yes, but I think we can assume that Mr. and Mrs. Haddock are legally married.
Some people are easily pleased.
What exactly did you see?
I seen her, what calls herself Florence Haddock. Well, you know what I saw as well as I do.
Yes, but would you please tell his lordship?
Well, 2 days before the flower show, I seen her throwing her nasty, dirty snails into my nice, clean garden.
Now, Mrs. Fowler, was this the only occasion in which snails were transferred by the defendant's wife to your garden?
She's been throwing them over regular.
And to the detriment of your crops?
To what?
And did these snails cause considerable damage to your plants and to your vegetables?
Ruined them.
I see. And because of this damage, to the prize, Hollyhock, your husband was prevented from winning outright with the cup. Is that correct?
That's right.
Right. Thank you. Thank you very much.
Now, Mrs. Fowler,
I'm not speaking to you.
I'm afraid you'll have to speak to me.
I only speak to those what I can call my friends.
I see. Well, now tell me, would you be willing to speak to his lordship?
All right.
Good. Well, perhaps you'll be kind enough to speak to him now and ask him if you have to answer my questions. Now, Mrs. Fowler, you claim that you saw my wife throwing snails into your garden.
That's right.
Well, how did she throw them?
How?
How? Yes, it's a very, very simple question, really. I mean, was she tossing them over underarm?
No.
No. Perhaps she threw them overarm more vigorously as from the boundary, eh?
I suppose so.
You suppose so? Now tell me, where were you when you saw my wife allegedly throwing snails?
In my bathroom.
And what were you doing in your bathroom?
Well, really.
Oh, really, my lord, I do declare. That is really a most improper question, my lord.
My lord, Sir Joshua is far too sensitive. You see, my bathroom window commands the same sort of view as Mrs. Fowler's. The view that one gets is totally dependent on what one is doing at the time. For instance, when I am shaving...
Are you suggesting that Mrs. Fowler would be shaving?
No, I'm not. Are you? I am suggesting that Mrs. Fowler did not see my wife throwing snails.
And I tell you, I did.
I put it to you that what you saw my wife doing was placing the snails very carefully on top of the dividing wall between the two gardens.
No.
And I also put it to you that a good deal of those snails originally came from your garden anyway.
How'd you make that out?
Because I saw you throwing them over the fence. I can see things from my bathroom window just as clearly as you can from yours.
It's a pack of lies. She threw them. I've seen her do it.
No further questions, my lord? Mr. Mason, would you describe yourself as an expert on gardening topics?
You might say that, yes.
Yes, indeed. I might say that. And of course his lordship might say that. But would you say that?
Well, taking it all round, yes, I would.
Well, perhaps in that case, perhaps you could help the court. Now tell me, what in your opinion is a snail?
Oh, no, I protest, my lord. Really, that is a matter of opinion.
Well, he says he's an expert. I'm asking him for his opinion.
Yes, but I did not put him forward as an expert witness.
No, he's just put himself forward as one.
Just go a little bit further, but please be careful you don't go too far, will you?
As your lordship pleases. Now, Mr. Mason, tell me, what then, in your expert view, is a snail? Is it, would you say, an animal?
The common or garden snail, otherwise known as Helix hortensis, is classified by the naturalist as a gastropod. It is a vegetable feeder, and it has a rather cutting upper jaw.
Are you troubled with snails in your garden?
Hardly at all.
Why do you think that is?
Well, I hunt them down and dispose of them.
Yes, I've seen you at the crack of dawn disposing of them. By popping them over the fence into my garden.
Yeah, you see, you must have quite a collection of snails by now.
Thank you, my lord, thank you. That is precisely the point I wish to make. No further questions?
Well, do you wish to re-examine, Sir Joshua?
No, thank you, my lord.
I will now call, my lord, Mrs. Florence Haddock. Now, Mrs. Haddock, would you tell his lordship exactly what happened on the day before the flower show?
Oh, now let me see. Well, the alarm woke me as usual, and I went down and put on the kettle for the early morning tea. And then I got the milk and the papers.
No.
Do you remember the silly man left
Yes.
the Telegraph instead of the Times that day?
Florence, Mrs. Haddock. I'm not asking you for a catalogue of the day's events.
Oh, I'm sorry, dear. I thought you were.
No, what I am asking you, in fact, what I am asking you is to tell me whether you had a talk with someone who is perhaps in this court at this
Oh,
moment.
do you mean Mr. Fowler?
Yes, exactly.
Oh, yes, I had a talk with Mr. Fowler. Or rather, he had a talk at me.
And where did this talk take place?
In the garden.
What was the conversation about?
Oh, gardening, dear. I mean, I'm sure Mr. Fowler's a very nice man, really, but he has got this mania about flowers and things.
And how does this mania manifest itself?
Well, you see, when I'm out there, he leans over the fence and passes remarks.
Does he? What, offensive remarks?
Oh, no, I think he's trying to be helpful. I mean, he gives me tips about weeding and about setting the blades of the lawn mower. Trouble was, I set them too low. That's why we've got all those bald patches.
Oh, that's why, is it?
Yes.
Well, what other sort of things did he say to you?
Well, sometimes he doesn't say anything. On this particular day, for instance, he just leant over the fence, smoking his pipe and sort of looking.
Looking?
Yes. First of all, at his lovely green grass, and then all our bald patches, and then his beautiful flowers, and our old rambler that looks as if it's growing out of the roller. You know, it's very difficult to explain.
Don't worry, Mrs. Haddock. I understand you perfectly.
Oh, thank you.
Yes, thank you, my lord. Now tell me, Mrs. Haddock, did Mr. Fowler's behaviour have any effect on you?
Well, yes, it did.
My lord, is this line of questioning getting us anywhere?
No, I dare say we'll know that in time. Mr. Haddock usually knows where he's going.
Thank you, my lord. Well, tell me, what sort of effect did Mr. Fowler's behaviour have on you?
Well, it upset me. And then I saw the snails eating our delphiniums, and I suddenly remembered your hollyhocks. So I gathered all the snails up that I could find.
Including those which were cast upon us by Mr. Mason?
Well, I expect so, dear. Anyway, I collected them all. There were about 20, and I put them all along the top of the fence and left them there.
Thank you, Mrs. Haddock.
Now, Mrs. Haddock, we've heard the evidence of Mrs. Fowler when she alleged that you threw these snails.
Oh, no, I did no such thing.
Well, did you perhaps ease them over the fence?
Oh, no.
Come now, Mrs. Haddock. You must have influenced them in some way.
What do you mean, put a spell on them?
No, I mean, you might have put them nearer the Fowler side than yours.
Well, I couldn't. There's not much room on top of a fence.
I see. Well, did you perhaps point them in the Fowler's direction? No? Or did you perhaps give each of them a little push?
No, I was absolutely fair. I put them on the fence facing south, and the wind was in the northwest.
And the house faces southeast?
Yes, and the sun was in the west.
That's all right. No further questions, my lord.
I have no further witnesses, my lord.
No, my lord.
Very well, Mr. Haddock.
My lord, in the case of Rylands versus Fletcher, it was held that if a person keeps a wild and savage animal on his property, then he is responsible for the consequences should that wild and savage animal escape and do damage to a neighbor's property. But, my lord, in this case, I would like to liken it to perhaps a wandering tiger who has escaped from a circus and who comes into my garden. Now, surely I am entitled to use whatever means at my disposal in order to get rid of this wild and savage beast, even to the extent of shooing it into my neighbor's garden.
Yes, that's a very interesting point, Mr. Haddock, but does it arise?
Well, my lord, I was not responsible in any way. I did not bring those snails into my garden, neither were they under my control. My lord, I ask you to rule that a snail is an animal ferae naturae.
Well, what has Sir Joshua got to say to that?
My lord, Mr. Haddock's talent for exaggeration has led him astray. You've heard the evidence of Mr. Mason, who told us quite categorically that a snail is a gastropod. And I submit, my lord, that can no more be described as an animal ferae naturae than a tame budgerigar. My lord, there are only two types of animals, as far as law is concerned. On the one hand, domesticated animals such as dogs and cows, and on the other, animals described by law as ferae naturae.
Sir Joshua, perhaps you would translate this ferae naturae for the benefit of the plaintiff.
Well, certainly, my lord. An animal ferae naturae is an animal of a wild and savage nature. It's hardly an apt description of a snail, my lord.
Well, would you consider a more apt description of a snail would be a household pet?
Yes. Would you, Sir Joshua?
Well, pets have been made of equally unlikely animals, my lord. I mean, when I was a small boy, I used to keep white mice.
Yes, I'm not questioning your happy childhood. The question was, have you ever kept snails?
No, my lord, but I maintain that such a thing would not be impossible.
Really? Thank you, Sir Joshua. Well, now, you know, as far as I can see, this case is one of exemplary fatuity. Exemplary because it demonstrates the human genius for nourishing a trivial grievance, real or imaginary, into the semblance of a momentous issue. This is clearly an action which should never have been brought to court. But since it has, well, some of you may think that the person most deserving of sympathy is the poor judge on the bench. For here I am faced with the total inadequacy of the law as written to deal with what is essentially just a parochial squabble. Let me return to my own immediate problem. You see, as far as I can see, there is only one legal issue at stake here, whether a snail is to be regarded as a wild animal or a tame one. Well, as Sir Joshua has pointed out, the law allows only two kinds of animals, the domesticated and the offairae naturae, wild and savage. And it is now my task to decide into which category to put the snail. Well, it's not an easy decision to make, but since, unlike Sir Joshua, I cannot by any stretch of the imagination bring myself to believe that a snail is a household pet, well, then I'm forced to come to the conclusion that it must be wild and savage. Then Mr. Herrick has made one very cogent point. You see, there's no doubt whatever that if any wild, savage, or destructive animal escapes into someone's garden, well, that someone has every right to drive it out again, whether it be over, under, or through the nearest fence. And for that reason, I hold that Mr. Herrick may dispose of his snails in whatever way he pleases, and the action is therefore dismissed.
Well, I've seen her do it, and as far as I'm concerned, that settles it.
No wonder they always show justice blindfolded.
Silence!
I have not quite finished yet. In view of the total overall absurdity of this case, I shall make no order as to costs.
Well, come along, Florence. Drink up. This calls for a celebration. You realize what that verdict means, don't you?
Oh, yes, dear, we won.
Oh, yes, we won, all right.
You are so clever, Albert. But what about the costs of the case, dear?
Well, everyone has to pay their own.
Oh.
Well, that's all right. We didn't have any.
Oh.
And you see, as far as old Mason was concerned, he was only a witness.
Do you mean the Fowlers have got to pay Sir Joshua?
Yes, and their solicitor as well. And I hope they get jolly well stung.
Bonsoir, Madame Haddock.
Oh, good evening, monsieur.
Yeah, good evening.
Thank
Nice
you.
to see you again. Well, now, let's see. What would you recommend as a starter?
Oh, the escargots are magnifiques, Monsieur Haddock.
Are they really? I don't think somehow I could face them tonight.
What are they, dear?
Escargot, my dear? Snails.
Oh, no, not snails, Albert, not snails. They're so slimy.
Well, I know they're slimy. That's what makes them easily digestible. No, I think you ought to try them, Florence. You know, you ought to try everything once.
Dear, how much are they?
They are delicious, cooked in a wonderful garlic sauce.
Yes, but how much are they?
They are flown all the way from Chantilly.
Yes, but
How much are they?
£1.15 per portion.
£1? How many in a portion?
6.
6, is that all? Goodness, when I think of all the money I've been handling lately. It's terribly expensive.
Oh, Mrs. Haddock, they cost us more than £1 per dozen wholesale.
Do they really?
Yes.
Do you know, I think I could find you a supplier at half that price.
Dis donc, if only you could.
I think I can. Come along, Florence.
We haven't ordered yet, dear.
I've got an even bigger order on my hands now. Now, come along, my dear. There's work to be done.
Oh, but
And before the crack of dawn, too. Come along. We get my...
Les Anglais.